that type of extreme precision, and it can't be demonstrated how they did it. I would think, although I don't focus on the age of the Great Pyramid, I would think that it would be older, maybe even pre-Ice Age or Noah's flood, or whatever you want to call, pre-catastrophe. So that's a possibility.
Well, that would sure show that maybe we've been rebooted on this planet. I'm just wondering, change the subject for a second, Antarctica, the way it is melting. I'm just wondering if we're going to all of a sudden start seeing pyramids in Antarctica.
It's hard to say. There are some reports, and you can word search that, of course, of Antarctica pyramids. And there are articles, there are some sketchy pictures, and that type of thing. Certainly not enough research to make a conclusive conclusion about them when they were built or whatever, what they're for. But yes, we're in a revolution right now of understanding with a whole host of things that we're talking about, and it's very exciting times as a researcher or anyone studying this type of thing.
Well, it makes you wonder everything that you learned when you went to high school, college, everything you learned, it could have been nothing more than nothing, a lie. Because, I mean, as this stuff comes out, I mean, it throws everything that we have learned right out the window. I mean, seriously, I mean, how old is mankind? You know, how did man start? How did they, multiply and all this stuff? And if some of this stuff comes about, it certainly, again, I use the word reboot. Maybe the planet has cleansed itself once or twice. And this is, this is a prior, civilization that was on this planet.
I think that's a good explanation of the direct physical evidence. So that's it's all very fascinating. But what we're trying to do with our foundation is try to understand this ancient but very modern technology as an alternative to nuclear power or anything else. So we're trying to make this efficient water pumping system available to the general public.
Now, has anybody made a model of the Great Pyramid and actually got a water pump to function from the specs of the Great Pyramid?
To answer your question, no. There's no one that has made a working model of the Great Pyramid water pump that is consistent with direct physical evidence.
I find that part interesting too. I mean,
that is interesting. It's the Great Pyramid gives up its secrets very slowly. There are some people out there who have made some models that work, but they have pipes in the models that aren't represented in the direct physical evidence on the Giza Plateau. So the design is a little bit different than what the Giza Plateau has. So there's scholarly debate as to the merit of some of these models out there.
Interesting. Two, how is the government, the Egyptian government sharing? I'm sure, Art used to tell me he felt like they knew a lot and they weren't divulging it.
Well, I do think that there's information not available to the general public, and I also think that there is misinformation out there, and there's also they interpret some things incorrectly. The hallmark of that, idea is their misunderstanding of how precision stone cutting was accomplished. But yeah, I do think that there are some things that we don't know, certainly in Egyptology and also in at the Vatican. Their secretive library probably holds things that would, some information that we would love to have that would help the common man, but a lot of things are not made available.
Yeah, I just could not see it being a burial chamber, for a pharaoh. That again, I've read where they said it would take 20 to 30 or 40 years to build the pyramid. if it was all built by hand, I couldn't see it even being done in 200 years, to be honest with you. So they had to have some type of technology to be able to do it in a time frame.
They had high technology, and also the Great Pyramid was built with a huge cost. It's a huge structure, but it provided a huge return on investments, like for crops and everything. The largest structure in North America and most expensive when built was the Grand Coulee Dam, and it makes electricity and is a self-powered water pump. So that's all that it does. It just says and it does flood control. But it makes electricity and pumps water. The Grand Coulee Dam in central Washington. So it's an important thing for a civilization to have adequate water, and it provides a lot of purposes.
Oh, yeah, because I was also reading about the Great Pyramid. There were some people that even claimed it created electricity and all this other stuff. So, your concept of it being a water pump makes a lot more logical sense than a lot of it, like holding off comets from hitting Earth, or telecommunications to another planet, or, keeping the magnetic field. And of course, it's kind of strange on that, too. At one point, it did kind of cross over, didn't it?
It crossed over what?
Well, the pyramid at one time aligned up at one time with a magnetic field.
Well, they say it lined up with people come up with all kinds of things. The cardinal directions, the sides are aligned with north, south, east, and west, and there's a lot of alignments that people come up with, but they seem to be without causation. They're not, even though they're precise, they're not paired with some sort of evidence that indicates the two things are related, if you will. So, there's a lot of that type of speculation, but I think that's grasping at straws, or blind people trying to feel an elephant, if you will. One person feels the tail and another the side of the elephant. I do. So, but if you're going to study the Great Pyramid, I would suggest you first thing you do is study research techniques, and it'll save you a lot of problems through your life, because a lot of poor research techniques are used to come up with some erroneous conclusions, as far as I'm concerned. So that's a good piece of advice.
Well, coming off the pyramid, the water and stuff, was there any caverns or anything under the pyramid? Of course, maybe they're not letting the people know about it, or anything where the water flowed out.
Yes, I think that the upper ends of the King's Chamber vents was where the water exited the Great Pyramid. But I also believe that the casing stones that are now gone held a small passage similar to the vents, so that they could direct the water down to the base and then ultimately to the point of use. So there was missing parts of the Great Pyramid, if you will, that makes that difficult to envision for some people. But again, our DVD documentary, The Great Pyramid Water Pump, describes how water came into the Great Pyramid and how it exited. They had the King's Chamber vents go up pretty high to get a high head of pressure to make the Great Pyramid water pump function better. The Herodotus described the Great Pyramid as having an artificial duct connected to it. He wrote about that, and we don't know if that was the input that he saw in the 5th century BC, or if that was the output part of the water pumping system. So there's a lot has changed since the Great Pyramid functioned. So we're working with a puzzle with a lot of pieces missing.
Yeah, and there's no way to even calculate when it quit working, too, is it?
No, there isn't. But there is speculation as to why it quit working. There was some sort of an expansive force in the King's Chamber that caused the King's Chamber to expand. You can word search explosion in the King's Chamber, and we think a the hydraulic force expanded that chamber and made it so it wasn't watertight because there was a malfunction in that chamber. So there is that's why it quit working. And again, my book, the Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine, describes why the Great Pyramid quit operating.
Okay. Now, also, while we're talking about it here, because we're going to go for a break here in a few minutes, where can they get your book at? Where is it available at?
Well, I have 2 books and 2 documentaries out, and they're all available on Amazon.com, or they can go to our website and see the links at thepump.org. Just The Pump. The Great Pyramid is The Pump, so it's The Pump, and it's a nonprofit organization, and they're available on Amazon. The books are either Kindle ebooks or softcover, and the 2 documentaries are DVDs. So there's a lot of information, and it's very visual, so I hope people become familiar with this to find out what it's all about.
How has the scholars taken to your book?
Well, Egyptology, there's a wall of silence. They don't even say that it's wrong. They don't even acknowledge this direction of research. They're too busy talking about what hat the pharaoh wore and how to mummify a body. So, but people with a technical background say that this direction of research is quite compelling. People that are crane operators or that work in shipyards or understand how to move heavy objects, or even backyard mechanics say that this direction of research is compelling. So I appreciate that. So those maybe those type of guys are the real experts.
Well, I remember years ago when I was a teenager, my cousin, he owned one of the largest crane companies in the Seattle area. And
wow.
We were just sitting there on Woodby Island on his property, and we're, toasting, marshmallows and all that stuff. And he said, somebody brought up the pyramids and that, could we make a pyramid with our equipment we have today? And he laughed. He said, even with the biggest cranes we have, we could not do what that was done. It would be no way to line each stone up with that precision. And that was coming from somebody who, was an expert in the field.
Yeah. Amazing, isn't it? It's certainly something to think about, the high technology involved in the Great Pyramid, not only in its construction, which a lot of people will acknowledge, but also in its purpose. And I think that the original builders knew things about physics and technology that we don't know. Certainly there's things we know that maybe they didn't know, but there's things that they know that we don't. And that's the mission statement of our nonprofit foundation, is to find out the lost technologies of the Great Pyramid and redevelop those technologies for our modern but very troubled world.
Yeah, and it is troubled. And technology, not even in the pyramids, even the technology in that time where, they were doing at that time frame, give or take, at least in the pharaoh time, they were doing look at what they were doing with the bodies, how they survived thousands of years, mummifying them, brain operations, back then,
yes.
With precision, being able to go in and actually do something in somebody's brain, filling holes and teeth and stuff like that, and all the technology they seemed to have, and then all of a sudden it disappeared.
Right. Just the ancient Egyptians, who I'm not saying built the Great Pyramid, even they had a number of technologies that were quite advanced. You mentioned a few, but there's others. They had the Baghdad battery, which is a controversial explanation for the production of electricity, like a battery. They also had, they did C-sections besides the brain surgery, and they also had birth control methods